Good morning, guys. Hope you are all good, and welcome to our mindful eating webinar. So I'm going to cover what it is, how it could be beneficial for you, and how you can implement it. So mindful eating is a technique that has been kind of created quite recently, but it's basically drawn out the principles of general mindfulness. So basically, in a nutshell, it's paying attention to your food on purpose, moment by moment, and then basically enjoying the process of eating without judgment. So it's an approach to food that basically focuses on your sensual awareness of the food and your experience of the food. It basically is saying, let's look at food in terms of like how it's making us feel. Let's be grateful for it. We don't need to focus so much on, the calories, the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins, the scientific element of it. It's definitely more focused on the emotional side of it. The purpose of mindful eating was not basically as a weight loss tool. And you can't really approach mindful eating in that way and be like, okay, well, I'm going to do mindful eating with the view of losing weight, because essentially you're trying to not look at food in that way. You're trying to think about the feeling of food and the emotions. That said, it is likely that people that do practice mindful eating, like on a day-to-day basis, will essentially find that they do consume less food because it really helps with acknowledging hunger cues and fullness cues and satisfaction, that kind of thing. The intention of it is to help you learn how to savor the moment, savor the food, and basically just be present in that moment for the eating experience. Just basically helps you to appreciate food more and have a better, more positive connection with it. So it's beneficial because it can sort of help support. It's not a cure, but it's something that can help support you with like emotional eating, binge eating, and essentially generally just promoting a healthier relationship with food. Because you are just focusing on that food, it can help you with regulating appetite, obviously aiding digestion, and making it an enjoyable and guilt-free experience because you are literally just focusing on how the food makes you feel in that time without judgment. As I said, although it can lead to weight loss in some situations, not for everyone, it's not like an actual weight loss tool. It can lead to weight loss, but kind of doing mindful eating, as I said, with the intention to lose weight, kind of is self-defeating. It defeats the point of what you're doing mindful eating for. Essentially, what it boils down to is food has two functions, fuel and feeling. This is allowing us to focus more on the feeling side, but also the fuel side in a positive sense in terms of nourishment, and it's basically a more sort of holistic view of food rather than looking at it in black and white. So there's a couple of ways that you can implement it. If you want to do a bit of further reading, Google the mindful eating raisin experiment, because that has quite a good step-by-step. Basically, it tells you to take a raisin or an individual piece of food, like a grape or an apple or something, and it runs you through a step-by-step. It's by this Zen scientist guy. I can't remember what his name is. But he basically runs through the step-by-step process of being mindful about a raisin, and it's quite interesting. I mean, it's really long, and I was I'm not going to put it in here because it is so long, but I do recommend watching it reading it because it's quite cool. But essentially, these are the kind of main things that you can do to kind of help implement mindful eating. So the first thing is slowing down, and this is actually kind of where the idea of mindful eating can help you with weight loss kind of comes from, because essentially when you slow down how how quickly you eat, it allows your body more time to recognize when it's full, and this can take up to like 20 minutes to actually occur. This is normally why, like, you know, when we go out for dinner, like, we get food in quite quick succession normally if the service is good. So it doesn't actually give us a whole amount of time to kind of realise if we're full. So, you know, they bring the dessert menu round, 10 minutes after you've finished eating, or 5 minutes after you've finished eating, and they've cleared your plates. So it doesn't actually give you the time to work out if you're still hungry or not. But essentially, chew your food well, like that old-fashioned thing of like chew your food 20 times. I think 20 times is a bit excessive, but like I would say like 10 to 15 times. Pause while you're eating, put your cutlery down between each mouthful. And the way that this works is basically when your stomach is like full, it will basically release this hormone called leptin. You've got two hunger hormones, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is basically what tells you when you're hungry. Leptin basically tells you when you're full. And the leptin is reduced from your fat tissues, which doesn't really have anything to do with like actual fat loss. It's just that like a lot of hormones and things, well, all of your hormones are stored in your fat tissues. And that basically sends signals to the brain to say that you're full. So, and it's basically suggested that takes about 20 minutes to occur. So slowing down is really important. And I think this is going to link in a little bit to the idea of like leaving food on your plate. Like obviously a lot of us were taught when we were younger that we had to clear our plates, which is essentially why we probably really struggle with, like basically overeating, because we've always been told to kind of clear our plates, and that's like basically meant that our sort of leptin and our fullness cues are so like out of whack. So essentially I would always say, like, if you have food left on your plate, and you're full, like, you should leave it. And that's what our parents should have told us when we were younger. So yeah, the other thing, and this is something when I was writing this, I was like, oh my God, I'm so guilty of doing this, but like, avoid distractions. So when you're eating, you want to just be focusing on the food. So not watching your laptop or watching TV or on your phone on TikTok, which is what I always do, or reading, which is also what I used to do. And yeah, so basically you can be present with the food, and you're just like, your sole concentration is on the food. And I know this is like probably one of the hardest things to do, because, we do like habitually eat, like in front of the TV. Like some of us actually don't even have dining tables that we sit at. We eat with food on our laps. And I think like, eat with food on your lap, but like, just switch the TV off basically. But I think this is something that we all do. And I think actually it's probably the one thing that we overlook the most. So carrying on from how to implement it, listen to your body. And this is obviously going to go back to, listening to your fullness cues as well. But practice recognizing when you feel hungry, and basically thinking about what it feels like in your body to be hungry. And this will really, really help with the second point as well, in terms of like distinguishing whether it's like emotional hunger or if it's actual hunger. Obviously we know emotional hunger comes on really quickly, usually in the form of a craving, and actual hunger is more manageable. You don't go, oh my God, I need food right now. It kind of builds up over time. So yeah, like sit with your hunger a little bit and think like, okay, this is what actually being hungry feels like. What do I notice within my body? So for instance, for me, I start to notice that I hate being hungry. Like, it's probably one of my least favorite things, but I notice I get really, really irritable. And as someone that's normally quite loud, I will become quite quiet, and it's because I'm literally seething at the fact that I'm hungry. So for me, my hunger really affects my mood. But like in terms of like how it feels within my body, I think obviously from like doing a bodybuilding prep, I can deal with being hunger quite well. So for a long time, like, yes, it does impact my mood, but like I know that I can manage my hunger symptoms quite easily. And I know that it I know I can notice it as actual hunger, but I know that I can also kind of not pretend it's not happening, but like it doesn't impact my body, you know, physically. Whereas a lot of people, when they're hungry, like it will completely zap all of their energy and they'll really, really struggle with like doing anything. So think about what your hunger feels like to you. And then obviously when you start to eat, start with the amount of food that you would expect to make you feel comfortably full, or even not quite full, because you can always like come back for more. And I think sometimes we forget that, like you can always come back for more. You can always have a dessert, you can always have a protein pudding, you can always have something else afterwards. The other thing to do is, and this is something I always try and say in terms of like when you're going out for food, like never go out for food with extreme levels of hunger, because it will make you overeat. Like sometimes it's actually better to have a protein shake before you go out, and I know sometimes that kind of is like, well, that defeats the point because it's still calories, but it actually may mean that you eat slightly less whilst you're there. So you don't ever want to go into a meal like absolutely starving hungry if you can't help it. Obviously there's always going to be times when that happens. But then on the flip side, you also kind of want to make sure you're you know, avoiding as much as possible feelings of extreme fullness. And yeah, as I said, like, remember, you can always eat more if you still feel hungry. But I think like what I would always do is like eat my meal, wait 20 minutes, and then, you know, set a timer for 15 to 20 minutes and then see how I feel at the end of that. Like, and this is something I will do very frequently that I've been trying to stop, is I will eat my meal and then I'll get something sweet like straight away. When actually I'm like, you know, like yesterday I took my dinner to work with me and I couldn't eat something sweet straight away afterwards, and I actually realised, I was like, oh, I don't actually need it. And that was like, you know, because I had 2 hours after eating before I got back home from work, and I was like, I don't fancy anything sweet now. So it was really like, it's a really good habit to get into. And then, yeah, essentially, like, whilst you're eating, it's a good time to reflect on your thoughts and feelings that the food is making you feel. So, as I said, like, recognizing if you're eating for reasons other than physical hunger. Obviously, as I've mentioned, emotional hunger will come on really quickly. Physical hunger builds on over time. Emotional hunger is usually a craving. Physical hunger is basically like, I will eat anything. Like, if you go into a petrol station, you're like, I don't care what I get. Like, I don't care what sandwich I get. I just need something. And yeah, it's entirely normal. And I've said this like to clients, and you guys will know this for people that we've had like conversations about emotional eating with. You know, it is normal to eat in response to thought and feelings from time to time. Like, you know, as a society, as a culture, we associate food with positive thoughts and feelings. You know, you'll go out for a meal to celebrate your anniversary, or like you'll go out for drinks if you had a big win at work with the team, that kind of thing. So it's really normal to do that. And I think sometimes, like, obviously, you know, especially in a good situation, if you are eating because it's making you, you know, you're celebrating something, like, yeah, amazing, you should bask in that feeling. You know, and you should, you know, coming away from the emotional eating side of things, like, you know, recognizing your thoughts and feelings around certain foods will, you know, allow you to enjoy the food with all of your senses. And I think, like, recognizing that you are eating, if you are eating for an emotional reason because you're sad, recognizing it will actually then help you be like, okay, well, I know I'm sad now, like, I know I need to find an alternative coping mechanism or an alternative method of support, because I know this food is only going to give me quite short-lived emotions. So yeah, plan ahead and stick to regular meal times. Now, you'll all know that I'm such a fan of planning meals. So, like, plan your meals and snacks for the weeks. That's actually like the first level of mindful eating, really, is because you're actually giving some thought to what you want, and you know then you're going to be able to stick to those meals at those times rather than constantly buying stuff on the whim. Because you've planned things out, you're going to find it a lot easier to actually identify like when you need to eat because you're hungry and when you need to eat because you're emotional. Consider eating at regular times throughout the day, and like this looks really different for everyone. Like, some people are hungry first thing, some people aren't. Some people like to push their first meal back to 11 o'clock. Some people have to have it before they go to work. But like, identify the times when you're actually hungry and then plan your meals around that. And this is basically going to help you regulate your levels of hunger, which means you're not going into meals, being massively full, massively hungry, which means you're then likely to swing the other way to being massively full. And yeah, it will positively impact your eating behaviours and food choices. Enjoy each mouthful. So like this kind of comes back to like the chewing slowly, but like think about what that mouthful's doing for you in terms of like your senses, the aroma, the smell, the flavour, the taste, the texture. Think about like where it's come from. That's something I always like doing in terms of like if I have something that's like maybe a bit oriental, for instance, like I love having bok choy with my teriyaki pork mince. I will like frequently think about like, okay, where has this bok choy come from? Like I know it's not usually grown in the UK, like what country has it come from? What's the process of getting it over here? Same with rice, like, where was this rice grown? Like, I will think about like the origins of that ingredient. And like, especially if it's me, like sometimes I will think, it's almost like, I guess, being grateful, like rather than being guilt tripped, being grateful that like, an animal has sacrificed its life so that I can, properly fuel my body and be my healthiest and best version of myself. So yeah, it's kind of like the grateful element, the gratitude element of like being able to access all of these like varieties of foods from different countries and, being grateful that, in some instances, like something gave up its life for me. I know that's so deep, but sometimes that's, the level of gratitude that you want to kind of like focus on. And then, yeah, eat for fuel and nourishment. So like the feeling that you get from like eating food that is giving you like really good like nourishment and benefits is actually like, I would almost say in some instances, certainly for me, it's almost like the endorphins I get for like after exercise. Like I always come away from that meal feeling like really good. And I'm not saying that I then like come away from, if I have a chocolate bar, I don't come away from that feeling really shit about myself because, I'm thinking of like what that food has still given me energy in a sense. It's just energy that's going to be distributed slightly quickly throughout my body in comparison to, pasta, for instance. But the optimum word there is essentially satisfying. Like your meals need to be nourishing. Yes, like 70% of your meal needs to be, whole foods, nutrient dense, and often that will come with low calorie as well. But then like 30% of your meal should come from less nutrient dense, higher calorie meals. So like, for instance, like, protein porridge is one of my favorite breakfasts. Obviously the oats are really nutrient dense. I have protein in there and I have berries. All of those are very nutrient dense. And then I'll have like a 25-gram bar of dark chocolate or white chocolate, which isn't, it's still giving me energy. But that's the kind of satisfying element of it. It's the mental satisfaction as much as it is like the physical. And then coming on to that, for that idea of like having something, non-nutritious in your meals, like avoid labeling foods, like look at your meal as a whole. Your diet should be balanced. It should be varied. It doesn't have to be, clean and like pure, like it's balanced, like balance is, a little bit of both. And instead of focusing on what foods are, good and bad, focus on achieving, a variety of foods in your diet that, as I said, are going to provide you the nourishment, but also like the satisfaction and the enjoyment factor of food, because, food is not solely calories, macros, vitamins, minerals. It is also such like a mental and emotional thing as well. And if you want to do any extra reading on mindful eating, I would definitely recommend checking out Headspace, either the app or the website, their blogs or their YouTube. BBC for Good Food also has a really good article about mindful eating. And then obviously the BDA is like, it's like my favourite website for anything to do with diet and nutrition. So definitely check that out as well. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed.